What I want to do is shift to the other thing that we're going to do at our school board meeting outside of talking about the beginning of school is to talk about the new measures of student learning. Again, this is part of our new state accountability framework. This is decisions that have been recently made by our State Board of Education as implemented through our State Board of Instruction. We want to make sure that we inform our public of these new assessments, how they're going to be used, and what they are, and that's what we'll be doing at the school board meeting tonight. And I will now turn it over to Ann, who will then also have Frank speak to this as well.
Oh, good afternoon, and I would like to echo Dr. Morrison's comments about the opening of schools before we turn to the measures of student learning. As a 30-year educator in Charlotte, I can certainly tell you that this was one of the smoothest openings that I can remember, and we do give credit to our 18,000 employees for making that happen. Just as a quick review of where Charlotte has been as it relates to thinking about teacher effectiveness and where we are today, a reminder that Charlotte was a part of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation MET study. Many of our teachers, approximately 600 teachers, participated in that study to really look at a variety of ways that we measure teacher effectiveness or possibly could consider. And on the heels of that, we had incredible teachers who were dedicated over a year and a half in being a part of teacher design teams to study multiple ways that we might measure teacher effectiveness. At that same time, the district also pursued the development of summative tests in non-tested subjects and grades. We pursued that during the 2010-11 school year, and when it was clear that the state, through Race to the Top requirements, was going to be taking on that work, the district pulled back from that focus and worked collaboratively with the state to share our learnings in terms of the summative testing, both those things that worked well and didn't work well, which brings us to today and the State Board of Education decision in August to move forward with measures of student learning in a variety of high school subject areas as well as elementary and middle school science and social studies. So I will turn it to Frank to share more specifics.
Thank you. It's good to be here in Charlotte. I'll keep my comments brief. As Ann was discussing, the State Board made a decision this past August to require that LEAs, school districts, administer a set of measures of student learning, or MSLs. These measures of student learning will be provided in in non-tested grades. So in grades where there's end of grade assessments, or in courses where there are end of course assessments, they will not be required. These will be new assessments that have been developed by the state. They're offered in 22 different high school courses, as well as in 4th through 8th grade for social studies, and in those non-tested science grades in 4th, 6th, and 7th grade for science. So once again, those 22 new high school courses, and in social studies 4th through 8th grade, and in science, that would be 4th, 6th, and 7th, in those untested grades for ELGs and ELCs. As you see to your right, a number of the courses that we require students to take for graduation are covered in those, but there are also a number that aren't there. And so they include courses in the sciences, in English language arts, in mathematics, and in social studies, as well as several occupational studies courses as well. Every student will be requested to take one of these assessments who are in those particular courses. However, there are 3 groups of students who the state has said should be exempt from taking these measures of student learning assessments. One group would be students with disabilities who are instructed on the extended content standards, who are currently required to take the NC Extend 1 alternative assessments. The reason why is there hasn't been an alternative assessment for measures of student learning yet developed by the state, so they've exempted those students. A second group of students that have been exempted from taking these assessments are a set of limited English proficient students, LEP students, who are still acquiring English language. So if they have not yet scored a 4.0 on our WAPT assessments, they are still acquiring English and won't be required. But it'd be that, and they also should be in their first year in a North Carolina school. So those LEP students would have not yet scored a 4.0 on that assessment and be in their first year in a North Carolina school. The third group of students who will be exempt from taking this in rare cases, students who are deemed medically fragile because of a significant medical emergency, and we'll determine that on a case-by-case basis. Otherwise, all students will be expected to take these assessments. So, in order to implement this, the state has given all school districts a lot of latitude in trying to figure out how to administer this recent requirement. So what we've done to limit the amount of testing is we're going to offer these MSL exams, these Measure of Student Learning exams, in place of teacher-created exams. So they will not be on top of, but will be in place of teacher-created exams to reduce the amount of testing. In order to create some level of uniformity of testing conditions, we'll follow the same procedures and guidelines as we follow as a school district for end of course and integrated assessments. I do want to be clear that these assessments do not count towards accountability measures for schools. This is part of the state's teacher effectiveness effort. These assessments are not counted as part of the accountability measures for the schools like end of course or end of grade assessments. However, we're going to follow the same guidelines to be able to have a level of uniformity of assessment conditions across the school district. What we will ask, because these do matter for teachers and are part of the standards that will be assessing teachers, Standard 6, a new standard, we are asking that these courses, these assessments, count as 25% of the grade for students. We want students to take them seriously. These are the same types of weights that we give for other assessments, so we want to follow that course. As with end of course and end of grade assessments, we're asking every school to make sure that no less than 95% of students enrolled in those courses take this assessment. Of course, we're always shooting for 100%, but we set a floor, a minimum expectation of at least 95% of students enrolled in those courses, those grades would take this assessment. And there would be one caveat to this, is that students who are late transferring into a course, would have to take the test, but it wouldn't count against the teacher. Because these are being used for teacher effectiveness purposes, for students who are enrolled in a year-long course for less than 140 days, they would be asked to take the test, but it wouldn't count against the teacher. They'd be asked to take the test, and it wouldn't be counted against the teacher. For students who are enrolled in a half-year course or semester-long course, if they were enrolled for less than 70 days, they would be asked to take the test, but the results wouldn't count against the teachers. As Dr. Morrison noted, and as Ms. Clark also noted, we found out about this recent requirement in August. We were notified by DPI in August. So our implementation of this hasn't had the benefit of a great length of planning, but our team has begun to put this in motion and do it effectively and as required. However, the late notification does pose a couple of challenges. The first challenge is that LEAs, school districts throughout the state of North Carolina, are going to be asked to carry the financial burden of copying and administering these tests. This has happened after our final budget has been approved. So we're going to have to work diligently to find resources to be able to administer these exams as required, but yet minimize, if not eliminate, any impact on our families, and we're looking for resources to do that. A second part that has been delegated to districts from the state is for us to figure out how do we score these assessments, and there'll be different open-ended items as well as multiple choice items. We don't know how many yet, but there will be those. So we'll be working to find effective teachers in our school district, work with them out of school time to ask them to help with the scoring of those assessments. As we're working to get more information, I think Dr. Morrison has made a priority to say, as we know, we'll let you know. So we're still working with information, and as we find out more about the length of these assessments, how many items will be in these assessments, we'll have more information about the cost and certainly about how many teachers we'll need to help do the scoring across the assessments that we showed. And so as we look at this, we realize there's fiscal implications, there's several logistical implications, and we're looking forward to work with our teachers and our principals and our parents to inform them of this, to work with our students to prepare them for this, and to implement this requirement effectively.
So to that point about communicating with our teachers, we will be sending out a letter this evening to our teachers to let them know about the recent state board decision, to remind them about that these measures of student learning are in effect this year, to share as much as we know at this time, and to also offer an opportunity for an FAQ sheet that we've developed that we shared with principals today, and then also that we will be beginning a series of webinars so that teachers asking questions or needing more information can engage in those webinars, and we can have a thoughtful dialogue about what information it is that our teachers need to know as soon as we know that information. I think it's important also to note that there has been CMS involvement in the development of these assessments, although they are being driven by the state. We have been offered the opportunity to have some of our outstanding educators being a part of creating those assessments, and so we had over 23 CMS hardworking teachers as part of the creation of these assessments. We have 3 in our audience today, and I'm very grateful for them. I've actually had a chance to visit some of their classes and meet them personally. So we have Danielle Gladden from Bain Elementary School. Danielle, please raise your hand. We have Pamela Stamper from Crown Point Elementary. And we have Mr. Kevin Straw of East Meck. And all of these teachers have had an opportunity to help develop these tests, which I think is very important to give teachers a comfort level that teachers directly in North Carolina and in the great Charlotte-Mecklenburg School District have been a part of creating these assessments. So we thank you and our 23 teachers for having been a part of that. Just some observations about these measures of student learning. It is going to be a trial year. We know that. As Frank spoke about the cost, when people have asked me, well, what is the cost of having to do these assessments going to be to the school district? I don't know. And I know that's not a sufficient answer, but until I know how many pages these assessments are with these 22, I don't know how much the printing costs are going to be. Until I know how much of these assessments are going to be multiple choice versus short or extended essay, I don't know how long it's going to take and how many teachers we're going to need in order to grade these assessments, because we have to take the responsibility of grading these assessments. So those are things that we're going to have to work out. What I do know is that there is an intense commitment on the part of Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools that once we have these assessments, once we do know those factors, then we're going to take it as a source of great pride to do a phenomenal job with those assessments. And so we will make sure that we get highly effective teachers to be part of our scoring teams. We will give them sufficient training. We will have to compensate them for their additional time outside of working hours. And we're going to have to do a diligent job of giving them an opportunity to come together, to do score rounds, create anchor papers to make sure that internally we are consistent across our school district. Now, we will do that in Charlotte-Mecklenburg. I think the thing I just want to remind our public is that those things also have to happen in Wake, Cabarrus, all over North Carolina. And so we are responsible for those things to happen well in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, and we will make sure they happen well. 2 final things before we open it up for any questions that you may have. Just really excited about some very good news. We just recently learned that one of our schools this year has been recognized as the National Blue Ribbon Award-winning school, and that is Park Road Montessori. Principal Ann Morgalia, and we're very proud of that school. We were able to recognize her in front of her colleagues today at a principals meeting. They will be recognized in Washington, D.C. in November. But Park Road Montessori is our National Blue Ribbon Award-winning school this year. We're very proud of the leadership and the teachers and the community of Park Road Montessori. And then also we just found out recently that one of our teachers at Sterling Elementary School, Ann Sloter, has been named the North Carolina Physical Education Health Teacher of the Year. She's been teaching in CMS for many years, and so we're very proud of Ann, and we will celebrate her success as well. So with that, we will entertain any questions you have about opening of schools, enrollment, measures of student learning, National Blue Ribbon schools, or any other questions that you may have. Yeah.
Just a technical question, like let's say high school chemistry. It says they want a fall and spring assessment. Is chemistry a half-year class, or is it a full year, or is it 2 tests? Or?
It's a block, on a block schedule, so we'll do exams in January and again in June, just as we've done in years past.
So is that is the same student taking, I guess, 2 chemistry tests?
Actually, no. There'd be students enrolled in the fall semester and a different set of students in the spring semester.
So transportation was one of the big concerns around the DMC. How did that go?
Yeah. We were really pleased, Ann, about how well we handled that. And I say we, I don't just mean Charlotte-Mecklenburg, I mean our partners in the county and the city. We were very much aware of the constraints around our 3 schools in close proximity to the DNC. I was a chance to visit all those schools last week, and I actually had a chance to open up car doors and welcome children into the school at First Ward, and the kids were excited, and the parents were excited. They got a police escort into the school, so it made that second week of school a little bit more entertaining, but we had no issues. Matter of fact, at some of the schools, we actually got our teachers and students in faster than not having the DNC in town. Not saying we want a major conference every week, but really it was amazing how little impact it had on our school operations. And so, it was a difficult decision about whether or not to keep all of the schools open. And clearly, the safe thing would have been to close all the schools, and many school districts that have been part of national conventions in their cities have chosen to do that. We made a decision that we thought was right for Charlotte-Mecklenburg, and that was to keep our schools open. We made some what we thought were thoughtful adjustment of hours, some thoughtful adjustments of bus routes. Over 270 bus routes had to get changed, but we prided ourselves on keeping our communities informed, and our parents did a great job. Our transportation officials did a great job. Our city and county officials did a great job, and again, I just want to make a special lifting up of the leadership of Mayor Anthony Fox. He's not asking for any accolades, but I think that man definitely deserves it. A lot of pressure was put on his shoulder, and I understand about putting pressure on yourself, and I think we all have to acknowledge his leadership. And he made a commitment to me that whatever it was going to take to make sure our schools were supported that week, we were going to get. And anything we asked for, we received that week. So we had really no issues. I'd tell you if there were, but we really, I was calling LaParge every day, and we had our communications departments, as you know, at those 3 most impacted schools. And I kept on hearing everybody was at school and everybody had been picked up, and that's exactly what we wanted to hear. So,
yeah, how will you ensure that these MSLs will be fair to the teacher? Because it seems like this will be more impactful for the teacher than the student. It's just going to be 25%. So if you have little Johnny who doesn't like his or her teacher, and little Johnny knows that whatever I write here can impact my teacher, then how do you deal with that?
I say this is a little Johnny, a little Dedrick. I'm wondering about that. So it's a great question. We have to make sure that our teachers have a comfort level with the assessments, how they're administered, and the support that the school district is given. And so that's why we want to make sure that we make these tests accountable for everybody involved, including our students. And so that was the decision to make them 25% of the grade, consistent with other end-of-course assessments and final exams. So the tests will count. We will do everything we can to make sure that students are showing up for them. We want to keep our students, our families, students, and teachers informed as we learn more about them to give everybody a comfort level. But Dedrick, I want to put this out there, and that it is a first year of this, and so there probably will be some bumps along the road. And if there are any parts of these assessments that as a school district we have a concern about, because remember, we haven't seen the final assessments yet. They're not CMS driven. They're driven by our State Department of Instruction. We will certainly advocate on the behalf of our school district, our teachers, and our students. So I appreciate the concern, and I think it's a legitimate concern. But what we can do, and what we have done, is to make them relevant to count for our students. We will make sure our families and our parents are aware of that. And so we've tried to raise the level of expectation for the importance of these exams.
You haven't seen the test yet, but what's your understanding of how they're different from your regular end-of-course, end-of-grade tests?
Well, not having seen them, obviously, it's hard to say how they're different. What I do know is they're more in line with the Common Core state standards, and so they should be more rigorous. There should be a higher expectation of recursive learning. In other words, it's not only the learning that you were a part of this year, but it reaches back into prior standards and prior assessments. So that recursiveness, I think, is very important. What will be interesting is once we actually see the assessments, how much of them are multiple choice versus essay or short constructive response. Those things are very important. As a teacher, what I know is that the fastest test to write is an essay test, okay? But it takes the longest to grade. The longest test to actually, and then you flip it the other way, is a multiple choice test. Takes a long time to write, but it's like that to grade. And so I'll be very interested in how these tests look. for a couple of reasons. I need to know the cost of printing them. I need to know the cost of how it's going to take our teachers to be able to grade them effectively and at the standard that's going to be important for our teachers to have a comfort level with them. But the actual assessments will prove to be very interesting, but I can't speak to tests I haven't seen yet.
So, I mean, when the state says the district has to help with scoring, is the district solely responsible for scoring then, or does it get any state help with that?
What will happen is there will be what are called performance tasks, and there will be a rubric that's developed by the state, has been developed by the state, to score whether it's a writing or an actual task that the student has to complete. And there will still be multiple choice items that will be scanned, but before the entire test can be scanned, the performance task or the writing would have to be assessed on this rubric and then applied onto the test before the entire test can be scored. And that will require us to have teachers who are trained on the use of that rubric, and we will begin that. We'll be posting those positions for interested teachers to apply. We will compensate teachers for doing this because this will occur after hours and on weekends, and it will be the actual execution of the grading will be in a very compressed time frame at the end of each semester. So the turnaround will be extraordinary, and we'll hire the number of teachers in terms of the number of students that are enrolled in that particular course or subject. It will be heavier at the end of the year because all of our elementary and middle school science and social studies tests will be at the end of the school year. Our high schools will be divided over the 2 semesters.
So these would be even administered later than the end of course, end of grade tests if it's replacing a final exam, right?
Well, I want to clarify that in elementary and middle school science and social studies, the exam is not 25% of the grade. That's only for the end of course high school assessments. Currently, our EOGs are not counted as a part of the student grade, so we will continue that same practice in science and social studies. So the only place where the assessments will count 25% will be our high school MSLs.
There was a reference in the PowerPoint to figuring out how this will impact seniors, or something vague that I didn't quite understand what the issue was. What's the deal with that?
So we're just trying to be thoughtful about seniors. Ultimately, it's 25% of everybody's grade, but because these course tests are new, because the assessments are new, if it's 25% of my grade and I'm a junior and it negatively impacts my grade because maybe there are some issues with the assessment, we're certainly going to be cognizant of that, and we're going to fight hard to do what's right for the student. But if it's 25% of Frank's grade and he's a senior and it keeps him from graduating, that raises the level of concern. And so we've got to be thoughtful about how we administer these to our seniors. It's an area where, quite frankly, we have reached out and are reaching out to the State Department of Public Instruction to get some clarification of. We're not afraid of holding our seniors accountable for performance on an in-course assessment, but again, because they haven't been gone through a traditional validation process where this will be a baseline year.
Is this considered a field test of these exams or no?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a field test, but it will be the first time they've been administered. And again, like the first time on anything, no matter how diligent your planning has been, there's probably some opportunities for you to make it better the next year. The problem is your seniors don't have a chance to make it better the next year. And so if it keeps a young person potentially from graduating because on one assessment it impacted one grade, and then that keeps them from getting a credit that they need, we've got to be a better school district than just to say, sorry, try again next year. But that doesn't mean we're not going to have high expectations for our seniors, but it's just an area, as we've had discussions as a staff, we just want to be thoughtful about making sure that we're doing, I always say I'm a teacher on special assignment. I pride myself on doing my homework, just like these outstanding educators here. So we have to do our homework to make sure we're doing right by all of our students. It just raises the level of concern with our seniors.
The other concern is just the volume and the compressed time to meet a mid-year graduation and an end-of-year graduation. We can delay the delivery of report cards to students who are coming back the next year. We don't have that luxury with our seniors when there are 5 exam days and then graduation begins. So that's the other. We're right now, Joel Wolf in our accountability office is tabulating the numbers of seniors in each MSL by semester, so we can determine the number of teachers that we're going to need and whether we in fact believe that we can score quickly enough to turn their tests around to then be scanned and for them to be in a graduation lineup. So that is another dimension of the question with the seniors. And again, having not seen the exams, knowing the number of performance tasks, it's difficult to make a good decision. So rather than making one, we're holding the decision for seniors.
What did the district say about what worked with their testing and what didn't work with their testing to the state?
In addition to just sharing our work around the assessments that our different teacher design teams did, just lessons learned, particularly in K-1, about how long the test took to administer one-on-one to students, and the amount of time that took away from classroom instruction. So giving them that feedback on what we experienced, particularly in grades K-2, I think will be helpful to the state as they think about what measures of student learning they will use in grades K-3, particularly grades K-2.
Yeah. How frustrating is you've already approved the budget, now you have to go back and try to find money. You don't know how much money you will have to find. So what is the process? Will you say, find me $500,000, find me $1 million? You've done testing before, so you should have a ballpark figure on how much this test should cost. So A, we have a ballpark figure of how much this will cost. And explain to me the frustrations you have by going back and trying to find money after you've already approved the budget.
It's certainly frustrating as much as you've gone through a budget process. You've tried to be deliberate, thoughtful, proactive, and then you find out that there's some costs that you didn't account for. I think the comfort this year and next year is that there are the opportunity to use some race to the top dollars, and so we're certainly looked there. The question I'll have, and I'll be asking of our State Department of Public Instruction, I'll be asking our state legislators, is what happens when the race to the top dollars run out. And so what we're looking at, Dedrick, is probably a floor I've been saying of somewhere between $150,000 and $200,000. And my friend and colleague, Mr. Barnes, here has been saying that's probably not high enough. Again, it's hard to come out with exactly what it's going to be because when you say you probably have a ballpark estimate, I'll tell you, we really don't. Because what you have to say is you have 22 assessments, but if one of them is 4 pages and one of them is 14 pages, that's a heck of a difference just in the printing costs. And then again, how much of it is, if most of them are multiple choice, then they become incredibly easy and not as costly to get the test scored. But if there's high promotion of the short answer and extended answer responses, then that requires a lot more intensive teacher training, teacher score rounds. I mean, what you have to do, if you've ever seen AP scoring done well, and that's what we're benchmarked against, we won't do this with anything but a standard of excellence. So we'll look at how AP tests are scored. So we'll have to get great teachers, get them together, make sure they understand what they're signing up for, bring them in, do a lot of training, do anchor papers. So we're select some papers and we'll do score rounds. And so we're saying, okay, you gave it a 7, I gave it a 6, you gave it a 5. It's kind of like the Olympics. But then we have to go back and say, well, why did we score it differently? And then we have to find some papers that we all agree upon. This is a 7 or this is an 8. And then so you have to do 1 read, probably 2 read, and maybe even as many as 3 reads to make sure that you've done right by every child and ultimately every teacher who's going to be impacted by this. So we could just say, hey, just bring them in, do some quick training, score it once, and that would be less costly. But we're not going to do it that way. So once we know how many assessments in terms of the actual page numbers, we know the printing costs. Once we know the amount of essay and short answer, we know how much, or make a reasonable prediction of how much the testing is going to actually impact in terms of scoring them. Then we'll be able to come out with a budget. Again, there are race to the top dollars this year and next year. The issue that we're going to start advocating for is what happens when that runs out.
And talking about fairness to teachers, how will it happen? So if the student does poorly on this test, so do you pull the teacher in and say we need to give you an action plan, or since this is a trial year, you get a year pass and we'll talk to you next year? What's the process?
Well, I think the process, Dedrick, is more about the direction our school district is going. We have focused very heavily on talent effectiveness. And really it's a fundamental belief of this school district that we're a better school district in terms of putting an effective teacher in every classroom. That's our commitment. And so our talent effectiveness work over the last several years has really been about making sure we can identify an effective teacher so that we can make sure we've got one in every single classroom. What we're also challenging ourselves, and we spent a significant amount of time today meeting with our principals to talk about having a professional growth system. On a professional growth system, you're very intentional about who you hire. You get the hiring process right from the very beginning. So we're not standing in front of a Board of Education at the beginning of the year saying we have 99% of our vacancies filled. We're saying, Board, we have 99% of our vacancies filled with highly effective individuals in those classrooms. So it's how we hire people who have an attitude for excellence, that don't compromise, that have a can-do attitude. It's how we onboard them into our organization. It's how we provide ongoing professional development. It's how we provide career lattices. So as hard as it is for some of us to believe, but not everybody wants to be an administrator, so how do we give professional growth so that quality teachers can choose to stay in the classroom and still have professional growth? And yes, when we have a teacher who is experiencing performance concerns, how do we help them get better? What's their responsibility? What is the district's responsibility? And what's our responsibility together? That requires having multiple measures, of which assessments are part of multiple measures. And so we're used that as part of our professional growth systems. It will be part of what impacts the evaluation. We'll sit down with any employee whose performance is impacted with these assessments, and we'll look at the other factors that have contributed to their evaluation, and if appropriate, we'll create a professional growth plan to help them get better. What's important, if you're going to have a culturally respectful organization, if you put a person on a growth plan and it always leads to a dismissal, then people have no trust or confidence, and it becomes a culture of fear. So you have to have a belief that by helping the employee get better, ultimately, more times than not, it will yield a great result where someone practice improving, the quality of instruction getting better, students being served better. But yes, you also have to say sometimes it will not work out, and then there are more difficult conversations that have to occur. So we're priding ourselves on being a school district that is about personalization of instruction. That means we personalize instruction for 141,000 students, but we also personalize our response to any employee who has performance issues.
And that will happen in year one, the first year that you roll this out.
It's got to happen in year one.
Do we know what the other measures are as far as teacher evaluations?
We have a McCrell standard. You want to speak to that, Amy?
Well, the actual student growth that we're talking about, that will be an outcome of both the EOCs as well as VOCAT's testing for career technical education, the MSLs, is a student growth score, which will be part of Standard 6 of the teacher evaluation tool that's currently used by the state. So the teachers have been introduced to this new tool for the last 3 years, and there have been 5 standards on that evaluation. The state is now adding a 6th standard. So that will be a new dimension. The state will require a teacher to have 3 years of a growth score before this begins to impact their performance, but the teachers will be able to see the growth score from year one so that they have some sense of how their students are doing on the assessment.
How does this impact end of course, end of grade exams?
At the high school level, it will be treated just like an end of course test. It's going to be counted 25%. We'll expect all the testing ethics and all the guidelines that we follow for end of course tests. So for our high school students, it won't feel very different because they're accustomed already to taking an end of course test that counted 25% of their grade. And that's why we've been very intentional. We want our teachers in these newly tested areas to feel like their test is being treated with the same level of importance and accountability as the end of course or end of grade, so that students are motivated equally to do well on those tests. So that's a decision that we've made locally. My assumption will be many other districts will make that same decision. It's in the best interest of teachers to approach it that way.
And I think to that point, it is really important to stress this over and over again. This is not a CMS issue. It's an issue that CMS has to address. But our friends in Cabarrus, our friends in Wake, our friends all across North Carolina are also going to have to grapple with these same issues too. So we want to pride ourselves on communicating with our teachers, letting them know what's happening with the MSLs, giving them as much information as we have it when we have it, listening to them thoughtfully about their concerns and issues that they need to support their work, and then working collaboratively with all of our teachers and our principals to make sure that as we go through this first year with the MSLs, it's a very positive experience. I hope And our job is to make sure we're communicating it so that people do understand that this is the same conversation that should be happening in school districts all across our state.